do we have some instructions first to show? Yeah. Before we, yep. So I hope you can see the instructions. So if you have questions during the session, people online, so please use the chat for questions. We will leave some time for questions and answers in the end. But now I have a great privilege to introduce you to Elizabeth Strickler, who's a director of this is a really hard word for me to say, entrepreneurship programs in the Creative Media Industries Institute, Georgia State University, United States. We met with Elizabeth last December in Saudi Arabia in one of the conferences, and we were lucky to get her here, and now we will hear something about really interesting thing about the AI and World Wide Web, and let's see how this goes. So Elizabeth, please.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Okay, great. All right. Hey everybody. So just to preface today, it's going to be a little wild and woolly, and I need your participation, which is so you'll think through while I'm presenting, and then hopefully there'll be time for questions and we can really get into some of this, because I'm going to show a lot of stuff, and I'm not a futurist, but I want you all to see how these technologies might be able to be used in the work that you do. Let me go all the way back. Okay, yeah, actually. Okay, so let's just kick this off. And then, okay, so that was a short clip from a short film that one of our students made in a week at Georgia State University using free technology that's available to everybody. And so we'll refer back to this, but I'm going to talk a lot about how the virtual is made and how something like that is made, and just go through the technologies and virtual world building and how we might be able to, how all the technologies are converging, and how we might be able to use this in future studies, and what the problems are that still need to be solved, because that's what Juha told me to bring to you all. So the virtual is real, and how can we make it right? So this technology is all happening very fast and converging very quickly, and lots of decisions need to be made about what is best use and best practice of these technologies. So yes, I'm Elizabeth Strickler. The important thing to know is that I work at both the Creative Media Industries Institute, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what our facility looks like, and also in the business school. So I kind of merge these technologies together. But in the one other thing that you need to know is that I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. And because of our tax incentives, more films and televisions are made in Georgia than anywhere else in the world. So that's why I, engage in a lot of this technology. And we say, and Atlanta is the capital of Georgia. So we say Atlanta influences everything. And a lot of stuff that we've been looking at is like stories and how stories propagate throughout the world. It's really important. This is a study that we recently did that's 88 pages about a lot of the stuff that we're doing and some of the trends that we're doing. I'll share these this information later. So yeah, culture matters. And we are, oh, I'm sorry, but anyway, yeah. Yeah, so we propagate out a lot of stories, and this is really important in how you spread ideas. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that. Okay, so before we, oh no, I should be looking here. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, cool. Oh, okay. So yeah, so as we're going through, I'm going to ask you all how these technologies, I want you to think about how these technologies might help you in the work that you do, through decentralization and blockchain to protect data, which means 3D and virtual world content, envisioning potential futures and sharing them, like the first video that we saw, virtual collaboration with greater fidelity, rethink. We've all been rethinking how we can have conferences that are more virtual, that are more, but still have more engagement with an embodied style of collaboration, identify deep fakes, and then how can game engines help do simulations? That's probably one of the biggest, most obvious use cases for a lot of this. Yeah, so I'm going to go over a little bit about how virtual production is done. Did I skip a slide back here? Oh yeah, so problems that need solving. These are things that, especially for people who are coming up and looking for topics to cover, we talk a lot about the real world, but as we heard from one of the Millennium Project directors, that cybercrime is the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats to us right now, especially organized cybercrime. The virtual is super weird. We spend a lot of time locking our doors and protecting our book bags and what have you, but we need to be locking all our data and protecting our data. It's really, really important. So yeah, so data ownership and protection is as important as protecting money, and that's why I talk about blockchain. And digital labor, building these virtual worlds and doing things online is, that's our labor. Most of you all do digital labor, because at the end of the day, what the result is some kind of PowerPoint, some kind of spreadsheet, some kind of PDF, some kind of document. So it's almost all digital, and that is your labor. Big time, how to manage AI versus human generated content. I'm going to show you all some of the stuff that can be done so easily right now. And then, I'm going to use this word metaverse, and we'll break it down a little bit, but the open metaverse means that it doesn't mean that you have to have a high-end, $3,500 headset to get into virtual worlds. It can be on the web. 3D content can be on the web. Everyone needs to be able to participate, just like this is basically the next iteration of the internet. Everyone needs to be able to participate. Everyone needs to be able to build and engage in the virtual worlds, and everyone has a right to own what they create, meaning the data. And this, we went over that. So I'm going to go over a little bit about virtual production and how film and television is made today, and how those tools are being democratized so that it can be done by so many people now. So yeah, this is, that's the outside of our studio on the bottom left. And then the girl doing this, that's motion capture. That's how you capture motion. We have sensor-based and camera-based motion capture, but now you can use an iPhone, 3 iPhones in a room, and capture multiple people moving almost as high fidelity as you can with these $100,000 systems. So those two on the right are motion capture. The upper left with the green screen, that's volumetric capture. And I'm going to show you what volumetric capture is. It's where you capture somebody fully cinematically real from every angle, so that you can, so it's not 2D. You can zoom in and zoom out and move around in a fully cinematically real video. So Yeah, this is LED wall. So that is in a studio. And I think I've got a little video here that shows you. Yeah. So this video.
Anyway, I will share the sound as well because I didn't know.
Oh.
There was video
Oh,
sound.
no. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There needs to be sound. Okay.
Just a sec.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to show you this. It's just a LED wall. Well, they call it a wall, but it's basically the size of sort of the footprint of this building. That is LED wall from floor to ceiling, including the ceiling, so that you don't have to go to the Grand Canyon to shoot a video. You just go to a studio. So granted, this is the biggest one. This studio is the biggest one in the world, but the one at our facility at Georgia State University is just a wall the size of maybe half this wall, and tons can be done in that kind of scenario. So yeah, let's play this video. You can see the kinds of worlds that can be done in that. What's amazing about that is that it's not just LED wall, but it tracks with the camera. So if you all are in that scene and I zoom in on you, the background changes too, so that you really don't have to go to a lot of places to shoot. So we're back in studios again. Films are being made in studios again. Here's the example of volumetric capture. And
hey, yo, what's up, y'all? It's Jazzy, aka Jazzy the Rapper.
so you see
We
my
are here
mouse
at
moving
CMI
around.
with Wild Capture, getting ready for this virtual
So
concert.
that's
Are y'all ready?
fully cinematically real
All right,
from
so with that
any
being
angle.
said,
You can zoom in, zoom out. So if she's in the game enter on computer, you can pick which angle you see. You can pick how close you
come on.
which is really extraordinary technology. Okay, cool. All right, and then this. Okay, so this is free software that I'm going to show you. You all have access to it, and this just got released this week. So that's why I'm showing you not my own work, but the work online. This is called MetaHuman. It's made by Unreal Engine, which is a game engine.
MetaHuman Animator contains the essence of our 4D pipeline, but optimized to run on a single machine. It is able to use iPhone as well as stereo professional systems, and today we're going to demonstrate how it works. For this, we're going to need Mel, our technician John Cook, and just the phone. Mel, can you take your position, please?
Sure.
Yeah. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, and action.
I need performance capture to work like a mirror. I need it to capture whether I'm acting scared or angry. And sometimes all I need is a look.
Okay, but I want you to be thinking this is 3D, not 2D. Okay. Here's the results.
Mel's MetaHuman should now be ready in the level. Mel, you excited to see the results?
Yeah, can't wait to see it. I need performance capture to work like a mirror. I need it to capture whether I'm acting scared or angry. And sometimes all I need is a look.
Yeah, so you should probably be thinking about deep fakes right now. And I'm not talking about just 2D. I'm talking about when you're walking around in your game engines or your game worlds and a character comes up, it just looks so totally real. It's unbelievable. And this is free software. So as we move forward, I want to define a few terms. We're going to talk a little bit more about the metaverse, but it's basically not made by Meta or Facebook. It was originally a term coined by Neil Stephenson, a science fiction writer, but it's sort of the spatialized web. You've probably heard of augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality. So augmented reality is when you add a layer of augmentation onto the real world. Virtual reality is when the entire world is gone and you've escaped into an entirely virtual world, either via headset or a screen. And extended reality is somewhere in between that. And it's really a gradation. But basically, the metaverse is a less flat internet. Spatial computing. So a lot of people are now using spatial computing. Apple just announced their big virtual reality, or their new headset. They didn't use the word virtual reality. They used the word spatial computing. And I think that's something that you all can do. Think about the databases that you create. How can you spatialize those and make and tell the information and communicate better? How can you spatialize everything that you do? And then avatar is your digital representation. Apple used persona because they're trying to get away from like geek speak, right? So the metaverse, there's a lot of different ways to define it. And I'm sure you all have probably heard this, but Matthew Ball writes an entire book on it. So, you know, where we're headed, the next stage of not technical evolution, but human evolution. A shared virtual space that's created by the emergence of collective consciousness that transcends the boundaries of individual minds and bodies. It should be synchronous, happening all at once. It should be real time, and it should be spatial. So are we there yet? That's the big question. So one of the things I asked you all to think about how you can use these technologies as you, watch, what I'm showing you, but also I want you to think about everything in the real world is being recreated virtually. So think about everything that you do, everything that think about your towns, your homes, your dogs, yourselves, your offices, your classrooms. How can you imagine it in a virtual spatialized world? So digital twinning is sometimes you think about selves. So literally, a digital twin, which is often, an avatar. People are uploading their health data to their full avatars, their heart rates and their hearts, so that you can visualize the self, in a data format, a 3D data format. But mostly we think of digital twinning for the industrial metaverse. So the industrial metaverse is definitely already here. When people build buildings, they will often create maybe the electrical plan or the pipes, and because you use CAD drawings to build a building, you start digitally, right? You make something 3D like a building, and then you build the building, but you can also then know where all of the piping is, for example, and you could say, what would happen to this building if we had, twice as much water running through the pipes? And you can visualize how that would happen spatially. You can visualize how traffic might be, if you had more traffic in a city. So the industrial metaverse is here and already happening a lot. So that's happening. The social metaverse. So are we here yet in the metaverse? Well, of course, anybody that plays video games knows that there is definitely some. So the reason why I'm showing Minecraft and Roblox is that those aren't games that have a goal, a final goal to get to. They're virtual worlds where people build and spend money. More in Roblox. And if you have children, you probably know about this because they ask for Robux and they ask for digital skins. They ask for all kinds of things that don't make them play the game better, just make them look better in the game. It's a massive billion, $50 billion industry just in buying and selling digital objects and assets. So, okay, this was last Saturday night.
Oh God, where? Do you see them? Oh shit, here they come, here they come. Here they come. I saw one. Oh gosh. Oh! There we are. Oh yeah, whoa, oh gosh, no, they're eating me. Get them.
So I don't know if you could tell, but the top is what's really happening, but the bottom is what we're seeing and believing, and that is what people do, on the weekends now. You don't go to the movies, you go into the movies. Okay, so what does all this mean? We just saw a bunch of really awesome stuff that's created, you know, that people are spending their time and money and energy in. But we've got this problem in the virtual world, which is that everything can be copied. Everything. Right click. You can right click text out of, you know, your friend's exam. You can right click, you know, an image from somebody, because so when we share things on the internet, we keep a copy and then share it with somebody else. Well, think about the real world. I mean, you know, this isn't that big of a thing. I could kind of walk out of here with this today and take it. But that is, that makes me a not nice person, right? But we do that online with way more expensive and more valuable things than this. So I have to go in. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a ton of topics, and then we can break them all down. So the promise of the next iteration of the internet is that you can't just copy everything that everyone creates. And it's a huge, it's very complicated, because, you know, we are in a world of abundance. We want to share things, you know, but you really don't want to share. I mean, it took a long time. You know, I know how these things go. They're not that expensive, but you really need them when you need them, right? And you just shouldn't, you know, people taking everything from everybody might not really be a great idea. So Web 1, you know, we talk about is where you got on and you could just find information. You could find, it's like a library. You could go and get as much information as you wanted. Web 2 was when we got on to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we could read and write. We could share our thoughts and, you know, read everybody's and interact with each other. And it was great. It connected us to each other. The problem is Web 2 is built on platforms that are owned by other companies that, you know, basically like the top 5 companies own almost all your data. You have to log in and ask permission to get access to your data, right? And they get to monetize all of that data. So Web 3 is the, you know, the promise that it would be read, write, and own. And you own your own data, not just like your, you know, your health data or your, you know, tweets or your Facebook posts, but everything that you do, you have a data wallet that you own, and then you give access to people, to different parts of your data. You know, so that's the promise of, and via blockchain technology. And there might be other technologies that allow that, but they're a totally central, you know, and this is, there's a tension, and we don't know the exact balance between centralization and decentralization. Because if you own your own data, I can attest, I've had a Bored Ape stolen from me, which might not mean anything to anybody, but it's a very valuable image that, you know, that I was not responsible enough in protecting. So when you own your own data, you're also responsible for your own data. It's like cryptocurrency. When you own your own cryptocurrency, if it gets stolen, there's nobody to cry to, right? So yeah, decentralized platforms. But this is where, you know, the technologies are going and are, you know, and you can see the more embodied the internet becomes, the more you really want to protect your own data. All right, so I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. Well, I think I have time. Okay, so 60% of Gen Z and 62% of millennials. I'm sorry, Anna, wherever you are, but I am using buckets that, you know, present your, you know, how you present yourself online is more important than how you present yourself in person. That's why you see, you know, crazy kids like not even caring, you know, that they're in the restaurant, you know, taking the best shot of their food. And, you know, they don't care that they look like a fool in real life, because they're going to look like a, you know, rock star online, and that matters to them. So online matters a lot. You know, when you think about, yeah, well, you probably can imagine. Yeah, Roblox, in-game currency. Sorry, I didn't get to finish that slide. It was supposed to have an actual statistic there, but I wasn't sure on the stats. I didn't want to posted there. Okay, so I'm quickly kind of go through and see if I can help you all think through data ownership and digital assets. So this is my son just went off to college last year. I asked him to pack. This was the first suitcase that came down, was this suitcase filled with shoes. Okay. You know, you can kind of tell a lot about who he is right there, right? You can tell, you know, look at your own shoes. You picked them out today. You bought them, you picked them out, and you probably have way more than this number of shoes at home. I can guess. And there's only so many pairs of shoes that you need for utility, right? So a lot of it is about flexing, attracting a mate, finding your tribe, I don't know, expressing yourself, but shoes matter. But in the avatar world, you know, this is just a friend of mine who is leading the fashion industry. And this is, I mean, where she is at now, this is a pretty old slide, but the avatars matter. So in 2021, when the NFT world was exploding, this young person, Ferocious, took their paintings and started to put them on shoes, and then started to sell those shoes, very niche, you know, sell those shoes as, you know, non-fungible tokens, which means a not copyable file. Just think of it. Don't let all these words, just think of it as a digital asset. Don't let the word NFT, you know, frighten you or, you know, piss you off or anything like that. It just means a protected digital file. And then Gucci started doing it. And now Gucci sells all kinds of digital assets in Roblox. So their whole fashion industry is happening in these virtual worlds. And then Nike bought Artifact, and I think it's very funny that again, Anna, sorry, but many of the youth don't like to use vowels. So Artifact, Ready Player. So anyway, Nike bought Artifact, and now they sell digital sneakers that you can never wear, but your avatar can. But then Colton Rain came out, and I think this has a little video, I'm not sure, but they came out and they started selling phygital sneakers. So it is a digital asset that has a physical connection to a digital asset. So when you buy these shoes for your avatar, you too get the pair of shoes, and they have to be sold together, and they have an NFC chip that connects the two. And then Nike followed suit. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that Nike followed suit with the sweatshirt. And so these sweatshirts, every one of them is different because the QR code is different on every single sweatshirt. And so when you buy your sweatshirt, the digital sweatshirt, you get the phygital version. You get the digital version. And what's interesting is that in the real world, the sweatshirt keeps you warm, but in the digital world, the sweatshirt lets you fly, because you don't need to be warm in the digital world. So there's all kinds of utility. And so that right there is like, when you think about the real world versus the digital world, think about, you know, you don't need to be kept warm. You don't need to eat and drink in the virtual world, but there's all kinds of other capabilities and exciting possibilities of things that you can do. Yeah, so here's just some more. Oh yeah, and now you can go to Nike and create your own. They're creating a whole ecosystem where you can create your own digital sneakers, and then they have a whole marketplace on there. So that's kind of this idea of in between centralization and decentralization. They're allowing more, you know, input from the end user, but they're still kind of controlling the marketplace a little bit. Starbucks. Basically, you know, when you hear all this words of NFTs and cryptocurrency and blockchain, don't let it turn, you know, you need to understand it, and you should not let it turn you off, because things are going that direction. all that Starbucks is doing is taking their loyalty points and loyalty cards and then making them, on their own private blockchain that just helps them keep track of it. So they can't be stolen, so it can't be duplicated. It just makes it easier in that regard. So, yeah. So, yeah, so this is, again, crypto, there's plenty of flaws in all of this space, but it's still rethinking money, rethinking digital goods, rethinking data and how we track it and monetize it and prove origination is important. And we're in, the problem is we're in transition of everything right now, right? But these are, I know there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of scams, there's a lot of BS, but there is some meat in there, and look for the meat. Oh, okay. So this, okay. So now you kind of have an understanding of the, virtual world building. And now we've kind of gone through sort of blockchains and that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about the teaching that I did with some of these concepts, and talk about some of the learnings that we had from that. And so I'm just going with the whole decentralization kind of thing, because I think teaching, it's kind of insane that you would give one person and that doesn't collaborate or communicate with other people when they teach a class or come up with a class, at least in the United States. I know that every place is different, but I think we're too siloed in the way that we teach, and that teaching needs to have a lot more input, especially as we move to more technology platforms and then research. So this is the team that we taught this class, and it was called Self and Community in the Metaverse. And we'll go through some of that stuff. And these are some of the external folks that came in. Oh yeah, okay, so one of the first things, so the students that I had in this class were not like the student that I showed you at the beginning. That was a student that was a master student who kind of already knew a lot of these technologies. These students, they had no prereqs whatsoever. They did not need to know anything. They didn't need to know what the metaverse was. They didn't need to be gamers. They didn't need to have any of that. So what we have realized is that meeting online, I've told you the industrial metaverse is already happening. The social metaverse is already happening. The enterprise metaverse, or how we work virtually, is still not there yet. It's pretty awful if you've done any of this kind of, Horizon Worlds or spatial IO, but it's getting there. And it's really great for prototyping. And I think that this, my other advice is to play with these technologies, experiment with them, communicate with your colleagues, and really start to kind of understand how they could be used. So yeah, self and community in the metaverse. We were looking for basically the bottom line that we were trying to do. We were not trying to convince the students that the metaverse is wonderful or important. What we were trying to do is see if learning new technologies empowered them to visualize themselves as having agency in the future. And so that's probably my biggest connection with you all, is like, how can people be empowered with new technology to feel like they have, agency and the ability to participate and, help make policy or change in the new, in the new worlds. And I think all of us even need to learn from that, because sometimes when I look at AI, I'm a little overwhelmed. So I have no idea what this is going to be. Okay. Okay. So the big themes out of the class were that, and I'm going to show you a couple of things, but that the building virtual worlds is really hard. And AI came in right at the beginning of the semester, generative AI, and I'm going to show you how generative AI can really help you build virtual worlds much more quickly. It's kind of like, think about it as the power tools of the digital, of the 3D world, just like you have cranes and tractors and all that. The students argued a lot about who did more work, who put in more labor. And that's when they started to really understand this idea of digital labor and keeping track of it and using some kind of, means to, to follow that. It's not monetizing it's graditizing in, in how they were going to be assessed. But they also started to, like, one of the things that you do when you get in virtual worlds is you want to trade stuff. I mean, that's what we do as humans. We want to buy and trade and sell and share and, start to kind of create an ecosystem and an economy. Yeah, so we actually also, we started to work on sort of a constitution for the virtual worlds that we were making. And this gets a little bit, far-fetched, but not so far-fetched, is that instead of nation states, a lot of younger people really deal with network states. The people online matter more to them than the people in their neighborhood. So the people, like when you ask somebody, are you like a, gung-ho Finnish person? They might be, or they might not be, but they're definitely a gung-ho whatever online platform that they're in. That world and that society and that community matters more to them than their neighborhood often. And so, coming up with rules and regulations of how you're going to navigate that is really important. So I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to look at that. Okay, so let's get into some generative AI. There's been a lot of talk about ChatGPT, but before ChatGPT, there was text to image. You all probably played around with it. I just was playing around. I could have done something with a little more import, but I just said, waiting for a train in the freezing snow, dressed in pink fur. And these came up. Okay, then I picked one. Okay, then I went to Adobe. Let's look at this. I asked Adobe to generatively fill a bigger space. It interpolated all of that other stuff, right? So see, this is it. I just said I want it to be bigger, and it just put those cars and all that there. But even more interesting is this one. I am a cat lover, but I asked for like a scruffy cyber cat on Midjourney. It gave me this image. I was like, oh, okay, I like this image. This is pretty cool. But I kept asking it to make a full-bodied cat, and it couldn't do it. But Adobe, I used what's called generative fill. It made that for me. And it gave me 4 choices, and I picked that. I mean, that's unbelievable. And, we were having a conversation about whether, ChatGPT can make something new in the world, but in the art world, the mashing up of different, disparate things is kind of what artists do, So generative AI, this is just 2D. It gets really crazy when you get into 3D, and I'm not going to have as many examples of that, but you can now ask it to make 3D worlds for you. So yeah. Anyway, I think I've already said this. And I'm going to skip over some of this stuff. Okay, so, but what I want you to do is see some of our students. So I asked them, what is self? First, I had them draw what their avatar might look like. And the tool was the pen and the paper. But then I had them use Ready Player Me. And it's just very interesting watching them sort of create themselves. Like, should avatars look like us, be a digital twin? So first they were using Ready Player Me, which is much more low fidelity than like MetaHuman. And then I had them get into MetaHuman. Oh yeah, so then I had them get into MetaHuman. This might be interesting. Let's see if it plays. Okay, it doesn't. But what's interesting here is that you can start with an image, and you can see the circle at the top. You can pick different people and you can blend them all together. You can sculpt the face. You can make these people don't exist. Then you can take the, record your face saying something and have a person say anything that you want. Here's somebody using MetaHuman, but then I asked them to go to Midjourney, and this is what they felt like they looked like, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to skip over some of this when you get to, yeah, let's skip over some of this stuff. I don't want to get to the end. Okay, well, here they are. So then we started building space that in virtual worlds. So you can be in a virtual world and build and paint and draw and sculpt. It's really amazing. And they're using just $299 Quest headsets that are made by Facebook, or and here's a dance party. And yeah, so what this part is, think like, oh, 5 minutes. Okay. So think about when you're thinking about virtual worlds, don't recreate this exact space. I mean, this space is created, it's wonderful, but you're not going to recreate this if you have all of the freedom and creativity and none of the, boundaries of, of the real world, of gravity, of, how many seats have to be in the room, etc. But you do need to make it familiar enough so people know what to do. So, that was one of the things that we talked a lot about. All right, let's just see. I'm going to skip through this. This is just them ideating. We're going to skip this too. That's just them creating in the world. Whoops. Oh yeah. So then these are just some of the worlds that we created. We created a campus that we could all go to and collaborate in. And we used we didn't use the Unreal Engine. We used OpenXR. Many of my students, so I think I kind of forgot to mention that 70% of my students are Black. They're from really low income families. So it's really interesting that we have one of the most high end production facilities and one of the more, disenfranchised, but incredibly creative and amazing students. But we created these virtual worlds we use spatial IO, which is you can use on your phone to create the world. You can use it on your laptop, or you can go in headset. Here's some of the worlds that they built. This was my favorite, choose your own professor. They had avatars of professors popping up and you could rate the professor, and it was pretty funny. Oh yeah, I already showed that. Oh, that's okay. So, again, back to the generative AI, one of the big questions that I have is, this is another, I said, what if a machine, the prompt was a machine that can create anything? So if everything can be generated on the fly, then what do we own, and what is original, and what is human made? And, I think this is just a tension that we need to think about. Then I said, an AI that can create anything, and the Midjourney gave me this. And then I just went into the shoes because I thought those Gucci shoes were ugly, and I made way better Gucci shoes than Gucci did. And then I just went really crazy because I was listening to Eric's Artificial versus Nature. And so I was like, what if I used artificial and natural shoes and created shoes? And sort of went all into that. Oh yeah. So I don't know if you all coded with AI before, but it's ridiculous. And it was a surprise in December. Now it's just like, it's whatever. Yeah. So these are the tensions, I think, in these virtual worlds that we're looking at. This is everybody needs to be working on these kinds of topics. And oh yeah, so this is a friend of mine who literally his heartbeat is constantly updating to his avatar. So think about that, like your quantified self that's just going into databases. Why is it not going into your digital twin, so that you can start to see what's happening in the body, right? So when you think about medical, possibilities, it's really amazing. Yeah, but they're really think of these as societies, like not technologies, virtual worlds. And yeah, I think I'm not really sure what the next slides are, but yeah, so I think that's it. Oh, yeah. No. And here's a few resources. Yeah. So I think.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mhm.
I would really like to see a couple of slides later on, so you probably
I will let you look at them all.
Yeah, for example, especially the list on the things that we really have to think about.
Mhm.
Because if you think about our teaching, for example, here, so this is the world they are preparing for. So really good questions to answer in an essay, for example, and not with an AI, with their own
Yeah.
brains. But yes, now it's time for questions and comments, and somebody's following also there is comments online. Lisa is doing that, so please, Anna,
Thank you, Elizabeth.
please take the mic because it goes to the Zoom.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for this really, really eye-opening and very rich and inspiring in many ways, and also discouraging presentation, I must say. I'm actually, there are so many thoughts going through my mind just to listen to you, how this potential of AI. You are by trade a IT professional. For you, this perhaps makes a lot of sense. But then when we think about what is the future we're going towards, what is the future that we're building for those who come after us? Do you think AI will contribute indeed to a more just and equitable future?
I think all of us are trying to figure that out, right? And I think that's why, to me, everybody learning what's going on, the more people know what's going on, the more people that will have a voice and agency in the policies that are made. Otherwise, all the tech bros are going to make the decisions. And that's what's happening now, especially in AI. So I think it's super important that everybody educate themselves, educate their children and their parents and their students, and quickly, because I do think there's great potential. There's so many great things that it can do. It's like fire. Fire can burn people up, but it can be used to so much potential, right? So that's, I think that we all need to get in there and get our hands dirty. Yeah.
That's not an avatar, that's the real person. Yes.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. I'm John from England. And I guess you're asking, actually, your challenge was what use would these be to people in the futures community, I think. So I don't have a good answer to that. But one of the challenges I think we all suffer from, well, the purpose of futures for me is instigating change, really. So getting senior decision makers to act differently and adopt policies. And I think, have you any experience, or can you comment on how you could use these technologies with, say, C-suite executives, or, dare I say it, quite traditionally minded individuals, to get them to think differently, or as a way of communicating strategy in a more creative way? Could we do that?
I mean, I teach innovation at a business school for all the, the students, and they come from, all over the place. So I think the same strategies that are used there, which is the same strategies that we use for everybody, make people feel like they're involved, that they're capable, that they're, it's their idea.
Okay.
But also get them to experiment with this stuff. And I know that not everybody has time to do that kind of thing, but it's so important that people do. And I think giving these, trying to figure out, we're all trying to figure out how to educate as fast as we can. So trying to put things like this together to show what the potential is, to show what youth are doing, to show where these things can go wrong. I think they'll get more buy-in and maybe make great movies about this stuff.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you can pass the mic on.
Again, fantastic talk. So as much people sort of a similar sort of age to me, got lots of different online lives, whether that be on Xbox, Instagram, LinkedIn, but they're all completely different. But we also have political boundaries as well, both online and in the virtual space. So how do you see them merging together in the future to have one metaverse in which we can walk around like a town square?
Yeah, so I did talk about the town square and some of those ones that I went through more quickly. So the open metaverse, and there's an open metaverse, there's consortiums and there's, whole study groups trying to figure out what the open metaverse will be and will look like. So again, just like we have different states and different countries, but then you can go from one, I can travel to this country with my passport and my suitcase and not have to get all new clothes when I come here and all new identity when I come here, because that's what's happening online right now. So how can we, have a digital identity that, traverses through, from one metaverse to another metaverse or metaverses. The company that I really find pretty interesting right now is called Lamina One. And I'll share that with you all. But the guy, Neil Stevenson, who wrote Snow Crash, which is where the term metaverse came from, he's, one of the key contributors to that company. But they're really focused on this idea of open XR, open metaverse, and open worlds, because that's super important. Yeah.
It's not a question, just a reflection, but we've been seeing a lot of people already using Midjourney to create images for the scenarios when we build scenarios, but it would be really interesting when we start using virtual worlds to communicate our scenarios. And I look forward to that, because it's very different when you have a written document versus having an image and then actually seeing the world that we are envisioning. I think it will be really interesting. So
yeah, no. So, we've done some of this like prototyping in virtual worlds. You can go to spatial.io right now, start making stuff and then share it with other people, and you can create these environments. So like, you could start with something like that and just continue. And yeah, I do think it's really low stakes scenarios. We played a bunch of different games while we were here in some of the workshops. Those can be envisioned in these virtual world environments that might be, more international. Yeah.
Yes, Sam.
Hi, Sanna Ahmenharju from the Finland Futures Research Center. Like millions of comments, but I will just have just one. Are you aware of any like psychological research on the impacts of these kind of virtual worlds? Just as an example, what I was curious of is that in psychology, there is this concept called existence bias, where people are not willing to change the way how they are, or they do not see like the future as being something different than what it is now. But when they are kind of exposed to simulations, which until now these simulations have not been virtual, but like some other types of simulations, that has changed their mind in like thinking of the probability of something changing. And I was wondering if this would have like maybe a stronger effect in that sense, like having these like seriously virtual worlds.
Yeah.
Is there any research on that?
There, there is research. I can't really rattle off too much of it, but there's like, for example, some of the experiences that I've had. Noni Di La Pina did, and she took the audio recording of a guy coming out as being gay to his family. He had the audio recording. She recreated that with just avatars, whatever. And then you were in a headset, like over looking his perspective, the empathy and the feeling of what it was like to be that person, unbelievable. It was not a good outcome. So it's really heart-wrenching. So things like that are amazing. But then there's a really avant-garde group that did a thing called Symbiosis. They're from the Netherlands. And you put on, haptics. You saw us in the getting rid of the spiders, and we had haptics. We had vests on and we're feeling the different hits from things that are happening to us. But Symbiosis had you pretend like you were a frog. And you had everybody was something different, but I was a frog and I had gills and it had haptics and like all these different parts of my body were like, and I had to go and find these flies, and then they were putting weird stuff in my mouth and stuff. But so I think that simulations like that, I have a better understanding of what it's like to be a frog too. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of people that do this kind of research that's more on the psychology, sociology. I mean, we have a company in Atlanta called Virtually Better, and basically they expose you to a lot of people like flying who need to kind of overcome fear of flying before they, for whatever reason, and obvious reasons. So yeah.
Yes. I have one comment. You work quite closely with the movie and TV industry. So what I started to thought about it, so okay, Universal Studios and Fox is not no more needed because you can start to create your own content. Or do you see that because of they are really big companies, there are a lot of resources, so there will be movies in the next coming years and decade?
Well, we see like
as we defined them now.
Yeah, it's every time the technology gets democratized, it just keeps the distribution, the control of the distribution is so big. But we are starting to see a slow decentralization of that, because it needs to not all be coming from Hollywood a la Atlanta, but, because these stories are really important. And I do think that that's what's propagating a mindset. And so, yeah, the stories need to be told from a lot of different places, but how to get them out there and get them, engaged with is complicated, but the tools are very much there. I think that the student that made that first film, I've watched him grow. I can't even believe the kind of stuff that he can make, so yeah, I think it's hard, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, because when the Netflix and HBO and those came up, so that already deteriorated in a way the business, and now I can see that this could be the next step in a way, making the whole picture even more fragmented than it used to be.
Well, we like getting rid of sort of mass media. I do think that everything mass and everything centralized is becoming more decentralized and less mass oriented. Yeah.
All right, Sanne, the last one, please.
I was just curious, what do you see as the potentially like the largest threats as a result of these developments?
Well, I guess that the biggest threat is that if we put more time and more energy into our digital worlds, not to get rid of our real world, right? But I mean, this is just a really terrible wearable. So when I can eventually kind of wear this on my head, as opposed to kind of having to do this all the time, or be tethered to my screen when I'm working from home and I have to sit here like this the whole time. So the potential of sort of disembodying, detaching from, these devices and augmenting yourself with them is a great promise. You've got your AirPods, you've got, if you had your glasses, maybe some haptics, you've got your watches and all that, but that's even closer to your body and even closer to what really matters and has meaning to you. And then all of that, the cybercrime and the ability to have it hacked and stolen and, overtaken is pretty frightening. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all the questions.
Don't go away. We just take a 1 minute of technical break when we get the closing discussion on. So just wait a second.
Yeah.
Nobody believes everybody's leaving.
Is no wind here. And then I have to go once.
So you can. Camera there.
Yep.
Sit there.
On the
Take
support.
some water.
Should I change my camera? I'm wondering if I should change the camera to this one.
Yeah. So it's,
Oh, she'll switch it.
yeah.
Got it. Oh,
But it's a. Yeah.
should I change the camera to the Logic?
No. It's yeah.
That one.
No,
It shouldn't be
yeah,
this one.
that's the same.
All right.
Sirkka, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? And
We cannot hear you
uh,
for some reason.
I have unmuted my mic.
Yeah.
I tried to do it again. Now I unmuted it. Can you hear me now?
I can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. You sure?
Okay, good.
I should put that on the camera. It'd be this,
All right.
this one, where it's closer.
Let's
from
start.
my
Sirkka.
phone.
Yeah, you can try it if you want.
She's going to be the chair of next 25 minutes or so.
Is it better?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that,
I
it
think
seems
better.
better. Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, let's start then. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here again now virtually after these 2 days of physical conference. And before closing of the conference, I've been invited to host a conversation with Elizabeth, which we just heard an amazing keynote presentation. And we are waiting for Wendy Schultz as well, but I can't see her here. So anyway, we can start this conversation part. When we think about the main topic of this conference, empowering futures, I would like to ask you all in your mind, concentrate on the concept of empowering futures. What does it really mean? Because it is fully packed with meanings which may be different to different people, different interpretations. In my view, empowering futures signifies giving power to individuals, companies, organizations, cities, governments, through long-term thinking, systematic and critical futures thinking and futures literacy. It means the power to think differently, in alternatives, in situations where the current systems and institutions are becoming obsolete, but are very resistant to change. This power also means that we can have an impact of the futures to be created. So this concept of empowering futures is a concept that leads us directly thinking seriously, who holds the power in the future? Whose futures are we talking about, and who has really the power in these futures, whether they are scenarios, futures images, or futures imaginaries. So it's all about power and agency in my mind. And when we think about the current geopolitical conflicts and war, they are an increasingly a threat to us. We are already living in a crisis society, therefore we need to develop futures resilience, which is something more than futures literacy. We need, of course, futures literacy, the capacity to use futures in the present moment to have an impact how the futures are unfolding. That's empowering. But we need futures resilience. It helps us to cope in polycrises, to learn from them and renew our activities, organizations, our systems, not just to cope in crises, but to renew ourselves. But at the same time, it means looking for poly opportunities, as pointed out by Jerome Glenn, CEO of the Millennium Project, in our special session yesterday. So, Elizabeth, I would like to ask you to put in a nutshell now again, you have presented widely on the metaverse and these kind of nexus of physical and virtual worlds, but the concept of empowering futures, how do you see it from your own perspective, please?
Yeah, I think, you know, the ability to create worlds or situations or scenarios in a virtual setting that is non-threatening and non-harmful, but still gives you the sense of experiencing something like that is one of the, you know, major potentials for virtual worlds. So instead of saying, you know, pretend you're in, you know, a pandemic, you can put someone in a situation where everyone has on masks and everyone's not talking to you, or, you know, everyone's keeping a certain distance. So simulations of that sort, you know, what would it be like if you only lived with, you know, a certain number of people, or so that's one potential, I think. I think getting more people in the room, you know, we can do that by Zoom, but if we can get more people in the room collaborating in these, you know, scenarios or in these virtual settings is another kind of possibility. And that's why I'm not talking about super high tech stuff, even though I am in the telling of the stories. So that's another potential. And yeah, I do think telling good stories that sort of, you know, so one of the things I put at the very beginning is envisioning science fiction and new ways that we might see us living in new ways through storytelling, and science fiction is another potential.
Thank you. Exactly so. And now that you mentioned this visualization, I really think that visualization is a powerful tool for developing one's futures thinking. It's becoming almost a categorically imperative. We need to have not just scenarios and narratives, but also in a visual mode. So that's important. And also, like empowering futures, empowerment means that you are not working alone, but very much in participatory mode. So I would like to ask you then about places and spaces, whether they are physical or virtual or digital. And you so elegantly called for a balance between human and virtual communities and spaces. If it's in a positive way, a balance reached, it's possible, but by no means it is self-evident. How do you see the position of power question here? I mean, as regards the spatial dimension and elements, is it so actually that who can provide the most attractive, safe and sustainable spaces has the power? What do you think about that kind of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we're seeing this kind of thing in a quasi-virtual space like Twitter, where it's not seen as a safe and stable space. And so we're seeing people kind of move off from there, you know, by, you know, choosing their agency, but there's no place to go at the moment. So I do think, you know, there's a Blue Sky is the name of one of the competitors, so aptly named. But I think that, again, the more educated the digital citizen is, the more they can make those kinds of choices that are empowering and not sort of turning themselves into, you know, the product, or to, you know, having less agency.
Thank you. And then in your presentation, actually, you had a quite nice prompt. AI can create anything. If AI can create anything, it cannot yet create humans. It can create human-like beings and entities, but there may be a point somewhere that this kind of fusion, meta-fusion, will happen in metaverse, people fused with technology and digitalization. But at this moment, I see this kind of Bermudan triangle between people, technology, and nature. Actually, do you agree that we have to think about more seriously what it means to be a human, what it means to be nature or natural, what it means to be technological, because it is no more three separate entities, but more and more intertwined combination of all these, and we cannot leave nature out. Perhaps it is a preposterous future, but we can have a future where nature has the highest power and humans and technology will be pushed down. It is not at this moment happening, but that's also one possibility. So what do you think about this kind of combination of people, technology, and nature?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Eric talked a lot about there's not a distinction between nature and human. I do think that we're emerging into a new species. And I think that it will be a mixture of nature and technology, you know, with people, but we might not be the most conscious or the most smart or the most capable beings at some point. And we're not there yet, right? But we need to prepare for that kind of thinking. Yeah, I mean, I think we already augment ourselves with technology, and, you know, but where nature kind of fits into this is, you know, it's really complicated. You know, some people believe in the simulation hypothesis, and I know that's a really simple way to kind of state things, but some people think that ones and zeros came before atoms. And so that's a really interesting kind of concept. So what's natural? Maybe ones and zeros are more natural than the atom. You know, I'm not really sure, but I think we need to be thinking that way. I have no idea what the answer is, but I think that with a billion people thinking about it, we might figure it out.
Yes, exactly. I'm very much interested in philosophy of technology. So I think we are entering a new level where we have to pose new questions about these things. But then when we think about the metaverse, and it's emerging and developing all the time, but what's going to be beyond metaverse? Can you have any ideas in which direction it may evolve, and what might be there behind metaverse when it's mature? That's a tough question.
Oh, that is definitely a tough question, but I love it. I mean, it's my mind is not quite as expansive as that. Although, you know, I think the rendered environment. So, you know, I don't know, metaverse right now, we're sort of thinking of as sort of very digital and very not real. But when we think of it as real, like haptics, you know, I talked very briefly about the fact that you can feel like my watch dinging on me, you know, with a vibration, but wearing, you know, haptic suits. But then when we integrate the feelings of, you know, being hit, the embodiment with the real and the virtual, I'm not really sure, but there's definitely something very interesting about being embodied versus, you know, right now we're not embodied. You know, I'm seeing you as a 2D person, and we're not embodied, you know, so that place of being very embodied is interesting to me.
Yes, and this kind of need for embodiment, it is something that we need to feel all the senses we have, and we have more senses that we realize that we have. But this is actually nothing new, because in France already 40 years ago, they had this experiment with information society, Minitel communication. They had research projects and actually experiments where, like, now we see each other through the screen, but there were scents like from flowers, from roses, you could have to complement with the image that you see. But of course, I think it didn't go further than that. But there was already then a realization that we would need to have like all senses involved when having interaction with human beings, and when we are trying to explore future images. So,
well, I wanted to add one more thing. I
yes,
thought of
please.
something. I think that the single observer. So right now we're single observers that only like experience the world from one single perspective, our eyes and our body. So Stephen Wolfram, who started MATLAB, really believes in computational thinking. So having multiple points of view for your own, feeding into your own thinking might be a really interesting beyond metaverse, as just something that came up to mind.
Yeah, thank you for that addition. And then I would like to move on now, reflecting this kind of question into which spatial directions futures will go in your mind. Because on the other hand, I mean, research and interest in futures, not only in the field of future studies, but interest in general in research and innovation. We have, on the other hand, micro level, gene manipulation, synthetic biology, AI, human machine integration, where we can go really to the micro level and have there a new sphere of things. Or on the other hand, we can move towards the macro level. That means space exploration and exploring parallel universes even. So there are really like these two levels going more and more extreme from each other. Obviously, we need both, but any ideas about that kind of two-level exploration?
I guess, you know, many of us are very interested in microbiology, and other people are really interested in, you know, space, you know, the study of space, or going. So I think that as we evolve, we're going to be a multifaceted species that might be able to kind of think, you know, in both directions. But, you know, are we going to, you know, I don't know, maybe we'll be disembodied. You know, sometimes I wonder if we'll be disembodied and the robots will be embodied. And so then we'll live only virtually in our heads, and then the robots will be the bodied entities. But as far as which direction we're going, micro or macro, I don't know, but I love the question.
Okay, thank you. And I love these kind of paradoxes. And you mentioned the paradox of maybe robots becoming more embodied, and we are like releasing ourselves as avatars. But when we think about the topics within the field of future studies, future of work and future of cities are like permanent topics, because they are so close to us humans, and there are all kind of developments for both of them. But we are now entering a new level there because of AI, digitalization, and smart cities. But it is not enough. We have to have these kind of socio-cultural approaches attached to both of them. When we think about future of work, and of course telework became very popular and even obligatory during the pandemic. We have had decades of teleworking, but it has been voluntary. During the pandemic, it became obligatory. You couldn't go to the office. And after pandemic, some people fancied telework so much that they stayed working at home, or co-working spaces, or cafeterias, and offices may be becoming empty. But on the other hand, cities, what is a city? Also, the concept of city has to change, obviously, when we are entering new kind of developments in technology, but also in social terms. There are threats from polarization, and people, of course, have serious problems. So we have to have as a mission to have inclusive and meaningful places and spaces. I think you also mentioned that. So that's our goal, but how to reach? Are you positive or optimistic that we have actually now more tools and more elements and more insights to go towards that goal of having inclusive and meaningful spaces, both in workplaces and in cities in general?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I definitely don't know the answers. And I think it's actually the harder questions are the right now questions. It's really easy to postulate about all the crazy, you know, and I like all that, but like right now, and this is, I kept saying Anna, but I meant Rosa, who was talking about the transgentarianism, or, but basically youth it's I don't really know too much about the history and how youth has impacted, you know, the future developments. But right now, youth do spend a lot of time virtually building virtual communities. You know, they use Discord, and they use all kinds of tools that many older people haven't really don't have a lived experience with that. And so I think they might bring with them to the workplace new ways of engaging with each other and collaborating with each other, certainly creating culture and meaning. That's already happening. And I mean, we do this too, but youth have more of a lived experience in that. So I think that's you know, one place where I have a lot of hope that because they've dealt with trolls, and they've dealt with, you know, getting kicked off, and they've dealt with, you know, trying to collaborate with their friend in another country to try to, you know, combat the enemy. Maybe they can bring tools, you know, to us.
Yeah, exactly. Youth may help us de-learn, because learning new things and lifelong learning is necessary and important, but it is also important to de-learn from old habits that are no more relevant. That's exactly important as well. But then we are coming to the closer of this conversation, but I would like to raise a question of hybrid spaces, as you talk about physical, virtual, and digital spaces, and just add there all these elements from PESTEC, political dimensions, economic, social, technological, environmental, and cultural. So it's an entity. But Eric, was it yesterday, posed a question that what will be the key word for the next 50 years from now, because the past 50 years have been, the buzzword has been sustainability, and the whole concept of sustainability is of course idealistic, but it is sometimes empty because we don't define it the same way, but it has been the dominating buzzword. I would suggest this kind of resilient hybridity for the next 50 years, but I'm very curious and interested in knowing what would you suggest as the buzzword, keyword, umbrella term for the next 50 years for us?
Well, what comes to mind right away was something like adaptability, because we might be morphing. And so, adapting to really new and strange things might be really important, but not in sometimes that word might sound submissive as opposed to lack of agency. But I don't know, that's the word that's coming to my mind is adaptability.
Yes, I like that very much. And actually, I can see that it is related to hybridity, because hybridity has several elements as a fusion. So it is a potential for adaptability as well. And now I see Wendy. Wendy Schultz has arrived from Infinite Futures, just right for the last question. If I can see Wendy, are you capable of answering this question? I can't see you on the screen, but I can see the name in the list. We would be curious to know what oh, there you are, Wendy. Hi. Can you hear us? At least we see you now. So if you can unmute your microphone, please. It's muted now, so I can pose the last question. What will be the keyword for the next 50 years? You can see the background image with flowers and you with a serious face, but microphone seems to be muted. Sari, can you check that Wendy has the right to open the microphone? In the meantime, or now can you, Wendy, hear us? And
I can.
okay, and did you hear the question? What will be the keyword for the next 50 years?
The keyword for the next 50 years will be transformation.
Okay, excellent, thank you. That's actually also related to what Elizabeth said, adaptability, and I said resilient hybridity, and transformation is where these are critical elements. So I wish to thank Elizabeth very much for this interesting conversation, and we agreed that we will be interviewing later on you about the future of work and workspaces. And Wendy, nice that you at least managed to be here in the concluding question part. So thank you, Wendy, for that. And on my part, I'm very happy and of these 3 days of conference presentations and interactions, and wish you all good futures. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Don't worry, this won't take long. All right. It's time to close up the conference. Of course, I cannot make a fully fledged overview on what had happened over the 3 days. We had over 100 presentations, speeches, and so on. So let's see. I have to read a little bit more about the presentations later on and see what really happened and what was thought about in the last 3 days. What I noticed that the atmosphere was really good. So thank you all for making it. And we can see that there are a lot of approaches towards the questions we tackle in our work. So after organizing these conferences over 20 years now, so I can really see that the futures and foresight, future studies and foresight, futures research has gained more and more influence and impact. And actually we are having more and more people who are interested in futures nowadays than when we started in 1999, first time. But now it's time to thank people. So I want to thank all the keynote speakers. Elizabeth is still here. Thank you, Elizabeth, once more.
Thank you.
Presenters, guests, and participants. So you have made the content of the conference. But then I have to thank our organizers. Riikka, Anne, Sari, our staff, our students. So you made the frame and the walls and the home for the conference. So thank you very much. I don't know if the slides are going on, but even if we have not decided next year's conference theme, you are all invited to join the conference next June in 2024. So, but please stay tuned. More information will follow in coming months. But thank you all